Hi everyone, my name is Karen Brewster and I'm a Master Gardener with the Penn State Extension Center County Master Gardeners. Today we are going to be talking about container gardening. Spring is really a wonderful time to begin thinking about container gardenings. We can really continue a container garden, beginning it in the spring throughout the summer and throughout the fall by making various amendments throughout the various seasons with a variety of plants. When starting to plan for a container garden, there are three things to keep in mind. The first is allowing adequate room for the plants to fill in and grow. You want to be able to use the right soil and be sure that the container that you're using has essential draining. There are three different varieties of soil that you'll often see in the stores when you're looking for potting soil. And the three are usually topsoil, garden soil, and potting mix. Of those three, you'll want to use the potting mix for your container garden. Those seem to work best. They often have peat and perlite intermixed with the soil, which helps for draining, which will be very useful as your container garden endures throughout the summer months. Drainage is also very important. There are a variety of ways that you can ensure that you have proper drainage. One is to make sure that you have holes on the bottom of your container. The second would be to include some gravel for a larger pot to ensure drainage. And then one very useful piece of information is to not use pots underneath the planters when they are outdoors, as those the saucers underneath the pots will often retain water, and that can help to rot the roots of your container garden, which is not something that you want to do. When planning for your container garden, there is a technique called the thrill, fill, and spill technique. And as you can see here, those three aspects really make for a very visually appealing container garden. The first aspect is thrill, and of course that's the taller plant that's usually in the middle of the container. The second aspect is the fill aspect, which is usually the lower clumping kinds of flowers that go around the base of the container. Those could be annuals or perennials, and the thrill plant could also be a perennial as well, some grasses. And then of course there's the spill aspect, which is the beautifully vining flowers that usually drape over the bottom part of your container garden. In regard to fertilizing your container garden, if you choose a potting mix, it's very important to read the instructions. Many of the potting mixes that you will buy already contain fertilizer, which will last through a growing season. If you have a potting mix that does not, then you could use a fertilizer. Also, just using a good variety of compost if you're not sure whether your soil has fertilizer in it or not. Compost is another good way to go that will ensure that your plants are getting the nutrients that they need. We had mentioned earlier when you're planting your container garden to allow room for the plants to grow, and you can see on this slide some guidance as to how one might go about doing that. Failure to do it will allow an overcrowding, and sometimes plants do not grow well in an overcrowded planter. When you talk about watering your container garden, there are a variety of ways that you can do it. Overwatering will certainly be very damaging to the plants and to the roots. And again, it's going to depend on what kind of plants you plant in your container garden in regard to how often you water. This particular slide shows a water bottle that has some holes punctured into the sides of the water bottle. The water bottle is buried, and this is a very nice way to do a slow release irrigation type system for a container garden. In regard to how you construct your container garden, what kinds of flowers you include. Here are some very colorful examples of things that you might want to consider. Really, you can be as creative as you want to be when you're planting your gardens, and that's really the fun part about container gardening. You can also use perennials in container gardens, and that's one kind of plant that many people don't think of when planting their container gardens. I know I have often used hosta in my container garden, and they've done very well in a container garden. So again, you need to be creative in your thinking. The sky is really the limit as to what you can include in a container garden. If you choose to use some evergreens in your container gardens, you want to be sure that you're including a variety that is slow growing. And if you're using them in the winter months, perhaps for a winter type container garden, you want to try and protect the evergreens from the wind. The winter winds can be very damaging. Another kind of container garden might include fruits and vegetables in a container on your porch or your deck. They add very nice color. Blueberries are a fun way to including in a container garden. Blueberries are often not so easy to grow in the ground because they require an acid soil, so growing them in a container is sometimes a preferred way for some people to grow blueberries. And there is actually a particular kind of blueberry, I believe, that is specifically for containers. Another fun and colorful container garden for summer is planting an herb garden. Planting herbs in a container. You can start them in the summer and they will last long into the fall seasons. Nice for cooking, also visually appealing. Most of our herbs do very well in containers, and again, this slide will show you some pictures of some varieties that they have placed in a strawberry planter and some other styles of planters. Once you have your container garden planted, you can use mulch or decorative gravel to put on the top of your container. Again, it gives it a visual appeal that's nice. It also will help to protect moisture and keep moisture in your planter. You can oftentimes group several planters into one grouping to make a really nice impact on a patio or a porch. And you will see here that they've used pansies and some yellow grasses to make this grouping really very attractive and very spring-like. Hanging baskets are another very nice way to incorporate container gardens. And when you plant your container garden, you can also be mindful of attracting butterflies and bees by planting certain flowers that bees and butterflies find attractive. So again, creativity in your container garden is something that you can always maintain in your thinking. Nasturtiums and petunias are two other very great varieties that create a really nice dramatic display in your container garden. Again, finding balance in your container may be something that's important to you. Some people prefer to have no balance and just have more of an abstract look, and really both are very, very attractive. You'll see here someone used an old typewriter in this slide to use as a container garden. You can also use a pyramid type form to grow various kinds of flowers or vegetables on for another type of attractive container garden. And if you're planting a full sun container garden that is going to have a lot of afternoon sun, you may want to think about drought tolerant plants, something that may not require as much water. And that will ensure that that particular container garden thrives as well. In the spring, you want to remember to plant cool weather plants such as pansies or some of the bulbs that we're seeing in the spring season, those can be planted into container gardens as well. And just again, it really requires some thought when you're planting your container garden as to what season you'll want your container garden to be blooming. And if you plan it in such a way that you start out with some cool weather plants and then you amend for summer with some perhaps perennials or annuals, and then again amend in the fall with some cold weather plants again, you can really have a container garden year round. And the winter is another beautiful time for container gardens as well. And here we show some summer container gardens in this slide. Fall, again, we have some very pretty plantings that you can see, very creative ways of incorporating cool weather plants. And then the winter container garden is also a really very fun type of container garden. We talked earlier that you could incorporate some evergreen trees as long as you protect them from the winter wind. You can also incorporate some dried types of branches. A red twig dogwood is really very beautiful. White birch branches are very nice. I've also used thistles and winterberry as part of an arrangement, and that can also give just a nice contrast in the cold winter. It provides a warm, welcoming aspect to your front door or your patio in the middle of winter. Again, this slide just shows how inspiring container gardens can be. There are just endless ways that you can be creative. Window boxes are another form of container gardens which are fun to plant, and you'll see that this particular porch box actually has all green foliage plants, which again is another great idea. And here again are some other ideas for container gardens. So I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Again, when planting your container garden, the three most important things really are drainage, allowing room for growth, and using the appropriate soil. Keep in mind the thrill, fill, and spill technique, and have fun. Have fun with your container gardening this growing season. If you have questions or would like additional information on how to become a master gardener, please go to the website extension psu.edu.